Who's heard of Stripe here? Who's not heard of Stripe? Anyone not heard of Stripe? Yeah, okay. Oh, no, not a single hand. Stripe needs no introduction. And we have James here, who is head of growth for UK and probably more. Here you go, James.
All right, so I'm James. I work at Stripe. I guess I don't need to introduce it. There's nobody put their hand up. But if you don't know what it is, come and find me at the end and I can explain it. So we work with a whole range of companies, and a lot of them are SaaS companies. So I thought it'd be interesting to share some of the insights that we have from working with them. And we are ourselves a SaaS company, so there's a few things that I'll talk about which we do and we found to be successful. I like the other guys, I don't want to make this too like is what you should and shouldn't do, because I don't think there's any right answer for any of that. But I think it's always interesting hearing about other people's experiences. So first I thought I'd start with, we did some research recently with Tech City about what tools that different startups use. And there are a few interesting insights that I think relate to SaaS more generally. So about 15 years ago, it cost over £3 million to actually start a company. Nowadays, it costs just a few £1,000s. And really that's because back in the day, you had to buy a bunch of stuff up front if you were starting a company. You had to buy your servers and a bunch of packaged software and all this kind of stuff. Whereas now, because of SaaS, you're ready to go. You can plug a bunch of things together, and you can really focus on building your core product. So one thing is SaaS really helps other companies grow, and things like Charlie HR help you not have to think about what you're going to do with your HR department. It just works. Similarly, that's really helped companies scale as well. So in terms of the time it takes to get to 100 million users. It used to take about 72 months to get to 100 million users. If you're lucky enough to get there, it now takes 25 months on average. So really speeding up the pace that companies can grow. Similarly, there's a lot of change in terms of how quickly companies go international. So it used to take 41 months to go international. Now it takes on average 22 months. So half the amount of time it takes to go international. So all of kind of different SaaS tools that people use really help them scale their businesses quicker, and then also kind of go internationally more quickly. And we call all of those tools the startup stack. So really this is like the set of infrastructure and SaaS tools that companies use nowadays, and especially startups use to get up and running. And they really allow companies to focus on building their core product, getting companies and getting users and scaling their businesses. So nowadays, if you're starting a company, you don't build your own payment infrastructure anymore. You use something like Stripe. You don't have to build your own CRM like you would have had to do back in the day. Less than 12% of companies build their own CRM now. And, less than 14% of companies build their own servers and data infrastructure. People just use AWS. People use Google Cloud. And really, like, when you look at the tools, they've spread across all different parts of like the core kind of operating system of a company. So everything from legal, compliance, through to HR, CRMs, are all kind of built on top of SaaS tools nowadays, rather than having to set these things up one by one. And we think this is pretty early on in this trend, so I think there's a lot of scope for this to continue very far into the future. The impact has mainly been on kind of analytics, collaboration, communication, things like Slack. There's a bunch of analytics products, hosting and data storage, payments. But then there's a bunch which are kind of less touched: legal, compliance, recruitment, cybersecurity. All these things, I think there's a long way to go. If anyone's thinking of starting a new SaaS company, I think there's some good stuff to be done down here. Bunch of funding recently in London in terms of cybersecurity, compliance, as a service, all of those kind of things. A lot more to go in terms of building out that ecosystem. Okay, so anyway, now onto the practical part. I was thinking about what makes a successful SaaS company, and I came up with a top secret, very proprietary framework here. So I think the secret to success, no, this is all very straightforward, but I think the details are what's interesting. The secret to a successful SaaS company is really getting users, making a useful product, having people pay for it. Sounds easy, but actually quite hard. And then not letting them churn. So That's, the well-known, you got to get a bunch of customers, you got to get them to pay for it, and then you never let them leave, and you have a successful SaaS company. So going to walk through each of these areas and share a few insights that I've learned along the way from Stripe and from some of the companies we work with. So sign-up flow, I think, is really important. At Stripe, when we first started, we worked pretty much exclusively with startups. And if you were a startup back in the day and you needed to accept payments, you had to go through literally like a weeks-long onboarding process and filling in loads of paper forms and faxing them and providing like 3 years audited financial statements, which you obviously don't have if you're a startup. So we had to rethink that from first principles because we needed to work with startups. So we really went back to the drawing board on like what we actually need to collect, when do we need to collect it, how can we get people on as quickly as possible. And this is what we came up with. Essentially, if you click on sign up on our website, this is what you see. You can actually skip this and go straight to getting a set of API keys and using our test environment. Or you can just enter your email address and a password and we'll create an account for you. Obviously, if you want to be paid, you have to give us your bank details, but really staging that sign up flow and taking all the friction out of the beginning of it really helped us sign up a bunch of customers, developers who just wanted to try the product, people who are keen to just use it for one feature, and then once they're in and they start using it, then they see all the stuff that they can do with it, and they go from there. So I think really simplifying your sign-up flow and making it really easy for people to try it is super important. I think making it useful as quickly as possible is a really important thing as well. So this is things like training. When you sign up for a Stripe account, we list 4 different tutorials that you can go through, which are the 4 most common things that people want to do with Stripe. And so getting people to start using it straight away is really important. Similarly, I think not just when they sign up, but also ongoing in the journey, you want to prompt them to use specific features. We'll look at what type of websites people have, what they're selling, what their business model is, and we'll send them recommendations for, hey, looks like you're selling subscriptions. Why don't you check out our subscription features? So really kind of keeping them engaged in the product and building that engagement over time is really important. One great kind of thing that's become much more common these days is pre-made integration. So we've got a whole ecosystem called Works with Stripe. It's a bunch of pre-made integrations into pretty much anything you'd want to connect your Stripe account to, whether that's analytics, a CRM system, Squarespace, so you can have a shop front that's pre-built. And so having those pre-made integrations ready to go and making your users connect a bunch of things together is a really powerful way to make the product useful straight out of the box, rather than have to have them upload files or manually build connections, or even setting up kind of if this then that connections is a bit more time consuming than just like hitting a button and doing an OAuth. So that's a great way to kind of get people using stuff more deeply, more quickly. Next is user evangelism. We have a very strong brand with developers, and that's because we focused entirely in the beginning on making sure that they had an amazing experience. And so this has been something that's really powerful, and to the point that's been made before, picking one particular user and going really deep with them and making sure that they love your product is really, really powerful and actually takes you a lot further than you would expect. So we started working with just startups, and we kind of had a similar choice early on of, do we want to diversify into lots of different types of users? And we were like, no, we should also double down on startups and make sure that we're empowering them to start companies and grow. And actually, focusing on startups and developers really, somewhat accidentally actually, was a great way to spread the message beyond that. The number of, a developer or somebody who's done a startup or is doing a startup on the side and then is working in a big company, and then they're working on a payments project, and then they're like, oh, we should include Stripe on the list here. It's amazing how many times like a CFO calls me up, a big company being like, I don't know who the hell Stripe is, but all the developers won't stop talking about it, and they need me to sign it off that we can use it. So that really making sure you get that right and you have that one kind of profile that loves you, I think is super important and takes you a lot further than you would expect. You're not, by like really focusing, you're not actually narrowing your potential market. I think you're expanding it in the long run. And then finally, I think having something that's mission critical, like one thing that you do really, really well and that everyone goes to you to be the go-to thing for is super important. That's another way to really build engagement. And for us, that was just having an API-based payment system when we first kind of built that. and all of the kind of documentation around that. It was super differentiated. If you're a developer, there was nothing else like it on the market. And so that was like the go-to solution, and still is today. And then making people pay for the product. So this is, again, something that is obvious and every company needs to do because they need to make money and revenue, but it's harder than it looks. There's a lot of choices in this. You want to charge people monthly, annually, one-off. You want to charge people on a per-seat basis, per action, per company. All of these things are choices. You offer free trials, premium model or not. A lot of debate as to whether that's a good or a bad thing. Do you have limits? Do you charge for extra usage? You do custom packages. Do you have an enterprise level? This is just the things I could think of in 5 minutes. There's like a million choices here. I think what's really important here is there's no right answer, and you need to build in a way that allows you to experiment with all this stuff. You want to have these choices in mind at the beginning and make sure you have as much optionality to trial as many of them as possible. There's some things that you think will probably work, and they do. There's some things that probably won't, and they won't, but you don't want to be missing what the right monetization opportunity is. And so, we've built a bunch of features on Stripe that allow you to trial different subscription packages, how frequently they renew, move people between levels. So make it really easy for people to experiment with this kind of thing. And that really helps them figure out what the right model is and to scale from there. And then finally, once you have customers, my GIF isn't working. Oh, no, it is. Okay. Once you have customers, you never want to let them leave. So churn is something that can easily kill a SaaS company. You have a higher rate of churn than you're getting new customers. Eventually, you'll have none left. So you need to be really careful with this one. A few things that I think are interesting here. Monitor engagement goes without saying. You want to make sure people are actually using your product. People don't use it, then obviously at some point they're going to stop wanting to pay for it. They might have forgotten, but eventually they'll realize and they'll stop paying for it. One interesting thing here is you also want to monitor for very high uses of engagement. If somebody's using all of your features and doing everything possible with your product, then they're probably about to switch to another product that has more features, right? They've reached the ceiling of what you can do, and they might be going from, we used to use a bunch of different CRM systems, and then we migrated to Salesforce because they didn't have the right features that we needed. So if your users are really pushing the edges of what you can do, then either you have to keep building for them, or you might be about to churn them. I think feedback and marketing, obviously, you want to listen to your customers and build what you need to serve the customers you've chosen to serve. And you also need to keep kind of marketing to people as you grow. You're shipping a bunch of new features. Your users don't necessarily keep tabs on that, so you need to kind of keep selling to them along the way. Otherwise, you can churn a bunch of customers who are looking for features that you actually have, but they just don't realize. Unintentional churn is one that we look at all the time. This is where somebody stops paying for a product, not because they wanted to stop paying for it, but just because their credit card expired, their invoice address changed, all this kind of thing. And so this is a really big problem where somebody's using a product, then something happens, they stop paying for it for whatever reason, but they don't mean to. You shut off access, and then it's all too much hassle to figure out, and they just churn away. So that's why we've built a bunch of features to actually update the cards that you're billing in your account. And so when a card expires, which 30% of cards expire every year, we'll actually contact the issuing bank, update the card details, and then update them in your account. So that means that you cut out all of that unintentional churn when cards expire. Ease of cancellation. This is a tricky one to kind of walk the line on. You don't want to be one of those companies that makes it impossible to cancel the product. Experian and people like that spring to mind when I think about that problem. Where you've probably been in the situation there's a free trial and then it's absolutely impossible to cancel, and you're like, hey, you're still billing me 6 months later. I have emailed you about this. I've called you about this. You don't want to be that company. You also don't probably want to make it too easy to leave. If it's too easy, people have one bad experience, or one person says a bad thing in the company about the product, and maybe they unsubscribe. So yeah, you really have to be thoughtful about what your approach is here and how easy you want to make it. Bear Metrics, which is a company it's an analytics platform that sits on top of Stripe, they actually experimented with how easy it was to cancel, and they found just removing the button that allows people to automatically unsubscribe and replacing it with a click here and email us to unsubscribe, reduced their unsubscribe rate by 15%. So it's worth experimenting with those things. You can have a huge impact just from tiny changes. At the end of the day, it's not really that much harder to email to cancel something than it is push a button, but it's worth it for them for the revenue. And then finally, one interesting kind of advantage that I think startups have over more established, bigger companies is like the personal touch. So if you call up to cancel your phone contract or your credit card or whatever, yeah, you might get put through to some like retention team that give you a special offer of whatever. But you're not going to have the founder or somebody in the company calling you up personally to talk to you about it. This is something that we still do. The founders, John and Patrick, frequently call customers that have said that they want to leave, and they'll do a call with them. They'll find out why, and sometimes they leave, but often they can be talked out of it. And often just the effect of like somebody who really cares and is the founder calling them is enough to make them stay. And so I think don't underestimate the power of like just reaching out and speaking to people and going through that. It's really a win-win. Worst case scenario, they do leave, but you get a bunch of really valuable feedback from them on why they left. So that's it. That was my very quick tips that I've seen along the way. As I said, we work with a bunch of different SaaS companies, and we have a bunch of integrations with other companies. If you're not already integrated, if you haven't integrated your product to Stripe, have a look at our Works With page. It shows you everything you need to connect it. And once you've done that, we can list you on the website, and we get a bunch of traffic through there from users. And similarly, companies, like Slack and Asana, they use us for their payments, but they also use our ecosystem. So it's a good way to reach them. It's a good sales channel. So yeah, I think we're doing the panel now. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, James. That was fantastic.